What's up and welcome back to Gabe Miller Music. Today I'm going to be walking you through the entire process to use the Autosampler feature on the MPC One. This is the video that I wish I had when I was getting into it, because the process is actually pretty straightforward, but there are some little quirks to it and even a few roadblocks that you might run into. I'm going to walk you through how to get through all of those. So, all that being said, let's jump into it. So here's the setup. It looks a bit convoluted, but it's actually not too bad. You can basically ignore these two cables because these are what are running into my audio interface to allow me to record. Essentially, I've got my MPC One connected to the Minilog, feeding it MIDI, and then I've got my Minilog feeding the MPC audio. So I've just got one cable, since it's a mono output, running into the left input of the MPC. So the first thing I need to do is set my input, which is not something that's properly set up by default, which is a little bit weird. Because even though everything is set up, you're not going to be hearing anything coming from the Minilog yet. So go to Sampler, and look, input 1 is selected, but I have to actually go in and select it properly. And now you'll see that I'm actually getting some signal, but I'm still not hearing it. So I need to make sure that monitoring is on. And then you can adjust the volume of the input on the back here, because there's a little knob for that. So now when I play the synth, you're only hearing the outputs of the MPC, so this is feeding audio into it correctly. We're going to come back to this window in a second, but first I want to go to main, and I'm going to change this track type to a MIDI track. Now I need to make sure that it's actually sending MIDI out properly, so I'm going to change my MIDI port to the MPC MIDI port, and then I'm going to make sure it's on MIDI channel 1. So that's working. I am now set up to control the Minilog via MIDI with the MPC, and I am set up for the MPC to receive audio from the Minilog. Now we can actually get into the auto sampling process. To do that, we're going to go back to Sampler and then hit this little button at the top. This takes us to the auto sampler window. There's seemingly a bunch of stuff to deal with, but it's really not too bad. I've got the track selected, my MIDI stuff selected because we just set that up. Same with the input, that's all set up now. You can select your minimum and maximum note. I'm going to set this fairly low and let it get fairly high. I want to get quite a wide range of this patch here. I can also set the note stride, which essentially means how many intervals it'll sample notes at. So the higher note stride is, the farther apart samples will be taken and the more pitching it will have to do to map those to your MPC keyboard in a key group later on. And then the tighter together the note stride is, the more notes it'll take and the more space that will take up. So you're making some trade-offs. In this case, I'm going to leave it on the default. I'm not going to deal with velocity in this case, but you definitely can. You can get multiple layers of it for kind of more realistic playback. That's pretty cool to have. And then you've got your actual sampling information for note length and tail. This is super important. I've left this on its default settings in the past and ended up with some kind of pops and clicks as stuff got cut off. So I want to make sure that I'm setting my note length and tail properly. So let me hit a note. So that whole note lasts about 5 seconds. And so I'm going to set my note length to 3000 milliseconds, aka 3 seconds. And then set my tail to about 2000 milliseconds. That seems like it'll give me roughly the right amount of time. In fact, I'll set my tail a little bit longer just to give myself a little bit of buffer. You can name it, call it Minilog, and I can turn looping on or off. In this case, I want it off. So hit do it. And it'll run through every note. And you can hear what I meant about the different intervals. And it'll just keep going until it hits the upper limit, which is probably a bit high. Let me just get a new track going here. Set this to be a key group program. So we know that works. And while I'm at it, let me set my notes to a more pleasing scale. That sounds nice, but let's clean this up a little bit further. So I'm going to click Program Edit down here to take me to my settings, hit samples, And now here's something that will really come in clutch for this specific process. You can actually edit all of your samples at once. So select this up here and then change it to all. So now any changes you make in here will affect every single sample in your key group program. Super nice to have because I want to have an envelope that allows these sounds to ring out a bit. Like that. And that will apply no matter where in the key group I am. That all works, which is really cool. And that definitely gives me quite a bit more polyphony than the mini log does. And now that just lives in here and I can start adding effects. You can do that on the key group program itself, or just to make sure it applies to all the samples at once, I like to go into track mix and add effects that way. And in this case, I'm just going to add a basic reverb, crank up the room size, crank up the time, crank down the mix. This patch is probably a bit on the warbly side to be super duper polyphonic, but hopefully that gives you an idea of how powerful this is and how to properly use it, because it is simple in theory, but there are a bunch of weird little pitfalls that you can hit when trying to actually implement it. So hopefully this addresses at least most of them. One more thing I want to quickly show is how to export the key group programs that you've created. To do that, we're going to go to our main menu here, as you can see, hit the edit button, and now you can save current program. Once you hit that, it'll give you a choice of where to save it. I would recommend saving it on the SD card. That way you can very easily transfer that from this to your computer if you want to back it up or share it. And of course, it'll take up less of the internal memory. So you'll name it, hit save, and that's it. Super easy.
Barely an inconvenience.
Loading that key group program into a different project is also super easy. We're going to set this up for a key group, and I'm going to go to Browse, and I'm going to find where I saved that already. In this case, it is in my files, and I put it in programs. And you've got all these audio files here. We're going to ignore those and find the .xpm files, or you can directly get to those like this. Hit load. And then if I go back to main, that will be available as a key group program that you can assign to a track. If you would like to see more MPC One videos, you can click or tap up over here, and I will be back with a new video in a little bit. So in the meantime, thank you so much for watching.